The Kumamoto Bioethics Roundtable is every time I come here, I start to learn something new, and then I'm not sure I can even come back again every time, because there's always a challenge, and I thought I'd finished my work already before I came here. Then I started thinking about to rewrite my work. Start from now on, after reading or learning from Professor Takashi's presentation. I mean, basically, you're talking about interesting thing. Namely, I think the last question asking about the boundary issue, which happen if whatever structure you're working with, 2x3 matrix of normal situation, disaster situation, or in between you've got a transformation from normal to a disaster situation, and you've got three scenarios, namely either you help yourself first, or you save the other one, just like the Samaritan principle, or you have another system, namely the government declare, or we know this is disaster. So once you have a declaration that the disaster, like a declaration of war, namely all the trilateral tech, which assigned it to the disaster management team, namely to classify who are dead, who are likely to be safe, or who are walking sick, or not walking dead, okay, walking. Then you are talking about something interesting, who have the power to, in the last case, to define a disaster. Disaster we know for different reasons, and then for different trajectory of disaster. Namely, for typhoon, we know pretty well that 5 days ago or 3 days ago, we can track it. Yeah, the problem is it's repeat again. So this year we've got 22 typhoons, and then a few coming nearer to Japan. But one of the interesting things is when you go to the disaster, you find, I would support the argument on a discovery that after each disaster, we human beings learn something more. And we discover more something in terms of ethical principle, or in terms of the way in which we work. This is the origin of this, my preparation. Namely, we are facing a disaster on a way that is like the end of the world in some way. As a biblical saying, telling you are going to have something, not the judgment day, but before that you've got the apocalyptic, and then the learning process is still continuing, not just locally but also internationally, and the sharing experience. And that's interesting. It has to be learned globally, mostly because we are connected in such a way that even something happened in Fukushima, the whole supply chain of some important technical part, automobile part, were just destroyed. The same also applied some years ago in Bangkok. You have got the Bangkok flooding, and then you've got the supply of all the basic material were gone. We are living in the only world that we cannot separate the time and place specific disaster could have global influences, and that's implication. I think I will Professor Takashi share that about the cold disaster. We are not in the cold disaster stage. We have lived with disaster. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there was a debate going on in the technological studies about the normalization of technical accident. Technical accident in terms of nuclear sort of problem accident, or industrial accident, even like car accident. It's part of the way in which we are bondage with, we are bound to have accident. If the system depends is electricity, for example, yeah, if it depends on Facebook, Twitter, okay, maybe Twitter, some weeks ago, the Twitter went down for Mr. Trump for 15 minutes, everyone happy. But what if the Twitter went down for 15 minutes, everyone? That will be a problematic thing. We have relying on a system which deliver, or which we expect to have a spontaneous response. And then, yeah, that's a slide, so okay. That's the problem. I continue to talk without checking my presentation. But still, you are not going away. That's good. So my paper, or not paper, I've written a paper, but I need to redraft it given you have a new perspective, new learning from Kumamoto. Basically, the key issue is, so I try to bring out the interesting thing about the individual's idea of saving life, saving life, which is a fundamental thing, or saving one life is fundamental for bioethics. But if you really go to a system level, namely you say every species life, that would be, I would put it as a sort of responsibility of eco justice or eco ethics. And then in the process, you will find people are really learning from the disaster. Yeah, people are learning from a much more macro system. For instance, we know the climate change, we know the 2-degree debate, and we know that somebody is still stuck in the way they don't believe. They drop out from the climate change. They were just like Mr. Trump. And then you'll find, interestingly, at the same time, we are moving into a much more economics, okay? In Japan, you will see the beyond economics, namely how the economies, and we are reaching to a state that we are creating more interesting technology. We have more flexible system of doing things. Yeah, people can be replaced by machine. People can be replaced by artificial intelligence. Memory are replaced by the chips. And then you've got more upgrading, more updating with the different version of the information technology. At the same time, you're moving in this faster and faster development. But you take the demographic gain, you find Japan is rather interesting. You go the other way around, namely you got more old people. Okay, in my PowerPoint at the end, I will show you something interesting, namely how to take care of the people, aging population, how to take care of old people. There are different ways you can do it. You can do it by human being, you can build a robot, you can do it by all kinds of things. But if you really take the interest of the business and the government, they are more likely to rely on the offering of a new technology. And a new technology come up with this sort of thing. Namely, even with before Fukushima, we never thought there will be a sort of live show of this nuclear technology disaster. It's only the beginning. But more interestingly, you'll find if you really take the Fukushima case, the decommissioning case, or the risk containment, or the radiation containment program, it lasts for almost 2 to 3 generations. Maybe they start to learn how to make sure this what you say the natural technical disaster heritage could be restored in such a way in the coming at least 50 years, which overwhelmingly over in terms of temporal or time frame. You'll find even the nuclear technology happened after the Second World War, then it moved from the military one into a civilian use of producing power. Its history is really short. You got 50 and then 60 years, then you blow up, and then you got another 50 years to sort it out. The whole paradigmic change is you build a safe and secure nuclear power plant not to get anyone in. But if the system breaks down or blow up, you got another interesting thing that the system could not be sustainable, could not be contained. You still let another 40 or 50 years to make it not to the normal, but to a acceptable levels of radiation. And that's really take the whole history of the nuclear power civilian use in the last almost 100 years. You can only predict that it's going up and then down. My interest is also on the interest of how people interact with the calling. On one hand, for sure, the Japanese government has done quite a substantial international commitment in terms of the climate change and also in terms of the biodiversity. They've got 2 important meetings, conferences happen named after Japanese place, Kyoto Protocol, and after that, got the climate change agreement 2 years ago, or 1 year ago. And then you got the Nagoya Protocol for the biodiversity, which is interesting in a way, meaning saving not human life, but also saving the species, different ecological species. And then after that, you find interestingly, or because of the Fukushima disaster, you got another interesting initiative going on, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Reduction Program, which is interesting in a way that at least from what we learned in the public domain on how the government or Japanese government response is, or even plus the particular last one, okay, because of this disaster, And you find interestingly the Sendai one is becoming a classic case, not just initiated by the government, not just initiated by the scientific people, but more initiated by the local people. And then becomes the interesting thing about people relearning. And then you find interestingly life is too short. Yeah, short in terms of the historical frame, yes, on the one hand, but also you contrasting there with Japanese aging, people are living longer. At the same time, once you come up with the disaster situation, the life could be cut short without any warning. And that's the most critical part. And then you're caught in between biodiversity and human survival within and beyond the disaster, which I would, after learning from Professor Takashi, I would probably change in the co-disaster situation. Namely, we're working in a situation that disaster and no disaster are now neutralized or now sort of parallel development, which is really interesting to see how far we can cope with that sort of thing. The new initiative are represented by different types of responses from individual, from self-help to mutual help, for NGO, NPO activities around. And in fact, go back a little bit to the disaster learning experience. Maybe the most important thing from outsider may not be realized for how insider and outsider. The most critical learning phrase for the active engagement of local non-governmental and non-profit organization initiative will happen in 1995, January 17. Yeah, there was an earthquake in the Hansin area, namely between Kobe and Osaka area. You got there's a great earthquake, and after that, there are more initiatives coming out from the local people, from the people, not from the government, not from the organization we used to be. Namely, there's a birth of the non-NGO movement, both of the non-governmental initiative by helping each other at community level. And that one, if you really take that one into consideration, if you track the interesting part of 1995 and then the Fukushima, and then you go a little bit further to check with the Kumamoto one, you'll find there's a lineage of development, namely in terms of the people helping each other and within their own disaster area and beyond, and trying to be coping with helping each other. That's sort of mutual help and just discovery. In fact, I would name it as a apocalyptic learning, namely people facing with the uncertain world, facing with all kinds of risks, and then you find there's new types of learning around. And this is the interesting part, which I try to map it out. Sort of, it's not just the recognition of active participation, but the birth of non-governmental organization movement, people at large, particularly those who are in the younger generation, namely those who have been live in a quiet, peaceful environment. But the challenge might not be the war. Yes, in the last 72 years after Hiroshima and after Nagasaki, there's no existing of a active engaging war. But who knows? Maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, Mr. Kim from the North Korea trying another missile test. Okay, that will be heightened. Those who have been in peace for the last 70 years, even most of my students, they never thought there will be a war. Yeah, but who knows? And that's the interesting part, not just within Japan, not just within those who are engaging, but also within a regional or in fact global dimension represented by Mr. Kim and Mr. Trump. Okay, and that will, who knows, these two gentlemen or guy thinking, what's the ideas? And you really read the news this morning, it's interesting. I think the commander-in-chief for the US Air Force said that he was not such a stupid guy. He might not obey the rule to engage in nuclear engagement with the North Korea if someone or the president, Mr. Trump, order a nuclear attack or offensive war. You find the interesting part. Historically, you find war is sort of as a mirror image of the disaster, of the planned disaster. Okay, and then you find even the war is becoming much more easy, not just in terms of mobilization of the military, but in terms of mobilization of the people's opinion. Luckily, unluckily, the most interesting part, why people like Mr. Trump's Twitter down for 15 minutes, even for 15 seconds is critical. If and when someone like Mr. Trump tweeted, we are going to start something interesting, that will be the whole idea of peace in the last, after the Second World War. You see the global initiative organizationally, particularly by UN, particularly by NGO, even international business organization, they prefer some form of stability and prosperity, the two keywords. But I find interestingly, you find that the connectedness of the people and connectedness of ideas all boil down into a very interesting debate, moving into a very safe and to a very unsafe environment that coexist. So this is the reason why I think the use of the co-disaster is a quite interesting phenomenon, capture of both at the same time. I don't go into detail, and I will give you my PowerPoint or PDF file later. You can have a check. Yeah. Basically, you talk about is in addition to civic activism in terms of volunteerism, NGO, NPO, there's new discovery in terms of innovation socially, not innovation in terms of technical support, in terms of all kinds of technical gadgets, but how to use the gadgets or how to use the way in which we communicate to get something done for the public goods. Particularly, we know already there are a lot of initiatives for crowdsourcing, supporting all kinds of call in the internet for a very short period of time. You can get the people organization get organized, and they get the money and the resources to do some interesting job. In this particular, you'll find people are trying to pick up, address the issue in the social or community level in terms of certain types of the social connectedness, which I put it in the Japanese word with history and then a while, which historically has been there, and then you have now ready to be mobilized with reference or within the context or within the influence of the disaster or the disaster situation or risk. The risk is imminent, and the risks are profound, and the risk, the time frame from the risk to a disaster can be within days or in other cases less than a week. Yeah, which is a little bit interesting if you really compare the typhoon or the hurricane tracking. It takes maybe 5 days. You can see the coming of the natural disaster more likely. In fact, if you really compare natural disaster, there's more likely, maybe the exception of the earthquake or tsunami. Basically, you talk about if meteorologically speaking, typhoons are predictable, or even certain thunderstorm in certain way could be predictable. If you really check the weather news, there will be a lot of interesting initiative going on with asking people to take the photos of the cloud, and then you got all the data coming in, the big data you can generate what we're going to be happening in this particular spot where we have got thunderstorm in the coming 2 hours. Yeah. Basically, you can tackle that part, which if you have the natural calamity or challenges. But the most interesting part is not the natural one, it's the man-made one, namely the artificial, namely the technological accident. Most of the technical accidents, if you go back to all kinds of technical accidents happen, you go back to the fault tree analysis or the risk analysis. Basically, before what happened or what was the technical disaster, basically everything is safe. The safest you can get, technologically and calculatively in terms of different modeling. Yeah. But that's the most difficult part to be articulate. Yeah, nuclear disaster is again one of the representative example. I will take the case of the social initiative in terms of experimental practice, yeah, which has agreed on two principles, namely how to be peace and how to live together, and having the ideas that we share something together. Reciprocity is the key word. Yeah, that reciprocity go through among the community and go through certain ways of intercultural, which is represented by another virtues of taking care of parents by filial piety. Yeah. I don't go into that one, which I did some small notes, and I will put it in the real paper. The key issue is how to bioethics again about how to be survive individually or with respect, with dignity, and the equal ethics is another interesting part, which becoming transform the individual from individual to family, family to community to the human species and beyond. And then you'll find the interesting part of the new challenges is now we have got a very interesting phenomenal connectedness. Yes, in terms of the internet, in terms of the new media, in terms of the way in which people understand disaster, or understand even one particular interesting thing will be the disaster attack, or the threat of disaster attack. Yeah. In less than 2 minutes, everyone knows what's happening. Yeah. For my personal, I think the most interesting disaster for me is when, before I finish my class, my video would be uploaded somewhere. So some students they didn't come to my class and check and then laugh. What's the point to come to class? Yeah, if my student take video in my class, yeah, I have no control. Yeah. Namely, you've got parallel development of my class teaching in real and virtual world, which is interesting. It transforms the whole idea of learning in a place or disaster in a particular place. In other words, the understanding or the feeling attachment to a disaster is no longer just individuals, no longer just a particular time and place specific, and you transform all kinds of ideas about memorial or memory or remembrance and that sort of time and space and day specific. It can be generated like and replayed in the new media. The rest, I don't go into the details of my presentation. I think I got enough time, and then I'm open to questions. And if you're interested, I will can send you the PDF file, which is still work in progress. Let's just give you some ideas about what the thought and what the ideas are coming to my mind when I prepare this one. Indeed, I have to change again after reading all the interesting paper, and all the way from very interesting Kyoto School of Philosophy, Nishida Sensei, and then Tanabe Sensei, and also Taka Sensei, and then I have to change again before I can finish the paper. I hope I can finish in 2 to 3 weeks, according to me. Professor had something, okay? I'm afraid that he will put that absent, okay? This is presented as an absent, an empty page, okay? That could be interesting, a small disaster for me. If you can put it, you have got a presenter here, and the second column is paper and no paper, okay? Or something, okay? That will be the biggest thing. That will become a joke of my students. Yeah. Thank you much.
Thank you, Professor Lai, for bringing to us the lessons and learnings of these catastrophic disasters, which are vital for our survival, by your articulation on the interface of ecoethics, bioethics, and then hypermodernism and traditionalism that led to the birth of people activism in Japan. Any question from the body?
I appreciate your paper, but I would like to ask you to expand, explain sustainable resource uses, coexistence with nature and biological species, and taking good care of biological diversity. Kindly expand, explain.
Yeah, just give a very simple example will be, if you really check your mobile phone, you've got all kind of raw material, raw metals or raw chemicals, or the more you use, the more likely you have, we'll end this world earlier. Yeah, I'm lucky to say I survived for the last 50 years, and then I'm not sure my student can survive for another until they're 50. Yeah, I think the resources, global resources has been gone already. When you move from mobile phone, iPhone 8 to iPhone X, X1, X2, X3 in the future, and then the more you use it, the more suicidal it, which according to one of my students, he loved mobile phone, but he tried to be sort of converted into a non-mobile phone user. He knows, which is much more clever than me. He knows because of all kinds of connectedness, all kinds of information. It's not the information, it's a real tragedy. They know the problem there. When you get a mobile phone, you talk about labor right abuse, you talk about environmental resources, and then you have recycling. Even the recycling capacity is not available there, or the recycling is not recycling in the user country. Most recycled done somewhere. Somewhere you don't have the mobile phone penetration of 80-90%. Your mobile somewhere in some area, they are not really understand that is the toxic thing, and that's a global. And then also again with the interesting thing, if you really take them on moving into the daily observation, namely the food industry or the garment industry, you know already in the winter you've got a very big campaign against the fur animal skin. Okay, only human being we take animal skin up to us, with except Eskimo. Okay. And then you get a transformation already happening. I think 2 weeks ago, the Gucci has already said they are not going to do something on the killing animal for the skin to be wear by the human being, to be wear by some human being. Okay, and that's just an interesting debate. And then I think the calling is now. I think there will be the driven force of change is not just about the realization. The driven force will likely driven by the young generation. They are asking for the older one why you left this so chaotic world for us, and that's the most difficult part that we transform into not just a intergeneration war, but the intergeneration war within a family. For sure, I understand some of my so-called middle class colleagues. Okay, they have to answer to some very strange question, different lifestyle. Okay, they prefer a lot of interesting gadgets. But the younger generation ask, we can have gadgets, but how long it lasts? 3 months or 3 years? Then I don't think they will have the same opportunity that for the post-war baby boom, not baby boomer, but for the post-war peace international order. You talk about more around the world, not just more, but also the way of life differences.
Professor, another?
You mentioned Kizuna. You talked about good relations between people in Japan. So my question is, what are you talking about? In what relations? In Japan, most people avoid each other. There are very limited relations.
I know.
Look at the community and even go to the family. Just last week, there was, there is a very common criminal, offense called ore. Somebody calls a man, a grandfather, a father at home and says, "I'm your son, I need money, send money." And he cannot recognize this is not his son. He cannot confirm that if it was his son or not. Last week, 28 million yen somebody paid. And this is a crime that happens thousands of times, it's so common. And you look at the community, family level, so what?
I perfectly agree on that one. You can always have a duality of the social virtue. Okay, social virtue could be misunderstood, or it could be a way of abuse, for sure. But I am still a little positive. So I think we should take the social virtue at least as face value, and then sometimes you've got abuse, sometimes you're overdone, and then the same also apply which side you want to be with. I want to peace, I want to war forever, or the dark side of the real world. In fact, I think we are much more conscious about much more documented, as you had mentioned about to what extent that we should have. There's no way you can you can delete, or you can whatever to do with the dark side or the shadow side. The only thing we can hope as a human species, and the benefit we can have, if we have both, always the the thesis and antithesis. I would agree on that one. But in a disaster situation, you suddenly discover, only at that particular moment you discover, I agree on you, everything is equal or just. The same apply, disaster come, not just disaster, but also climate change, environmental pollution has not an equal impact, but still you got a basis that there's no way you can escape from PM 2.5 pollution. There's no way you can, the same apply to no way you can escape from the death or the physical death.
Yeah, what I meant was you can keep a distance and keep peace by avoiding.
Yeah.
But you're in a risky situation when you need help. There are very few chances you can get the help because very few people know about your situation. And that's, I think, a weakness we have now. We live in my community, most of my neighbors are above 85.
Yeah.
And they know very little about each other. Very, very, very little. I mean, me, of course, I don't know anything about it, but even they don't know much about each other. And that's a very profound weakness I see in the society. So, yeah, it helps with peace. We have peace in our community, but when somebody needs help, there's nobody to, unless somebody calls an ambulance.
But that would be what if I use, or if I borrow, wrongly, that is normal situation that everyone is so satisfied they were not ready to get help, but already showing in 95 we got a disaster hit in the Hanxin earthquake, and then people ready to find something discovered. But I'm not sure people might be my wishes or might be the experience told us that people really learn from the disaster by letting people help each other, and they are trying to do the restoration and try to have disaster preparedness is much more heightened in terms of the disaster. But the problem is you can ask the same question. Namely, what happened? There was 2 atomic bombs 72 years ago. Why we still have to do this sort of thing? Why human civilization still have to so stupidly still use the threat of have more gun? The easiest way you compare will be internationally, constitution-wise. I make this sharing to my students that if you compare Article number 9 in the Japanese Constitution, compare with the Second Amendment in the United States, Second Amendment in the United States allow you to have gun, arm and not gun, arm. And you can really compare these two constitutional articles. You find just a representation of the whole spectrum of human society that one is sort of defeated by the war, and then no more use of the nuclear assault, no more arm race. Yeah, as they learn from the disaster, that will be the third war. But on the other hand, you go to the United States, yes, developed country, but everyone carry gun or even put it to West. Okay, if you go to university, if you go to church now, which is accidentally you got a very paradoxical or strange. Quite a few of the mass killing happened in the church. It's supposed to be the most sanguine, safe for. But who can explain? You can really take this as two antitheses of each other. The society, the Japanese society, that might be a piece. I totally agree on that one, which the only hope we have really takes the positive out of the disaster. Always you got all kinds of problem happening within the disaster routing and all kinds of things. But as a I'm not a preacher, but I think there's a certain way if you really present that part as part of the interesting, people will love to learn rather than the other way around. Okay. If you really take for analysis, for factual analysis, for discovery, it might be also important to highlight what you are experiencing and what we are experiencing, and then there's always a limit. For example, if you really the connectivity to help each other is a limit. If you really take your mobile phone, you understand already. You're too connected in certain way. You are not free in some way.
Yeah, thank you. About your comment, I have a different picture of Japan and my household area. I speak to everybody as my mother told me to, and usually most people speak back. I speak to almost every stranger in the street, and most of them speak back. In America, less people speak back, and sometimes I even get discouraged and don't say hello to everybody I pass. But in Japan, I find if I speak to most people when I pass them, especially countryside, they always speak back. And about the neighbors' knowledge of each other, there's always some neighbors in each community I've found who want to get involved and others who don't want to get involved. And so I think it's partly our sense of community that we need to work. And the good thing, I guess, the positive thing of disasters is people do get together in every country, and every country says, this is our national identity, this is what's special about us, that in disaster we help each other. But actually, it's universal. In disaster, people do help each other. There's a few bad people who will take advantage of the situation, but generally everyone helps each other, whether you're in Hong Kong.
But you make caution that the disaster should or will never be the last disaster. So, for example, nuclear warfare is if you cannot have beginning of once. The disaster, small disaster, mean people can learn it. But if the disaster so overwhelming that you should wipe up the whole human species, including the dinosaur, that we have to rethink about the term disaster, which is a purpose. That's the interesting part.
Yeah, so that's your title is Apocalyptic Disaster.
It's correct, right? And it's gone, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, Professor Larry.